Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live stream. Waiting for anyone to join. We'll describe and talk about what it takes to be a polisher of gemstones. Meanwhile, I'd just like to thank everyone, particularly my subscribers, for writing in comments and just sending in a lot of support. Thank you. How are you going, Purple Space Cow? A polishing of gems live stream. A lot of people are struggling to polish, and I thought I would talk about the fine art of how you polish a gem. And obviously, a lot of you guys have seen my videos, but we might talk a little bit about other stuff. So I'm going to polish one facet today. This gem is taking me forever, as you can see, this piece of amethyst. So hello, Giovanna, how are you going? Hi, Alexander, welcome. And Ricky, how are you going, mate? So we're just waiting for a few more people to come on board. Meanwhile, if you want to ask some questions, please do. Hi, Stephen, how are you going? Enjoy your cuts. Thank you. I'll just have a sip of common questions that most people, when they watch my videos, they always say, I cannot polish a gem. Now, contrary to opinion, you can actually polish most gems on a tin lap, and particularly with quartz, something like amethyst, whether it's amethyst, rose quartz, clear quartz, most people have trouble faceting such a gem, and they would probably struggle with it on a tin lap. But contrary to what I've seen, and they say you can never polish on a tin lap, well, that's simply not true. For those people who watch my videos, I also have a Patreon account. Thank you for those people who have joined. They have already received a private video, and that was actually on polishing too, but it's a lot more in-depth, and the footage is a lot better than what this webcam of mine can show you. So I'll just let a few more people join in, and then we're going to get started. Any questions? No questions? Okay, well, I might start and just see who joins in later. Oh, morning, mate. How you been in isolation? Well, it's my third week. Those Aussies who are watching today, gee, well done, everyone. We're really slowly knocking this problem on the head, a lot better than other countries, and I do feel for people overseas. They are a lot of countries overseas are really doing it tough. So whatever we're doing, we probably haven't entered peak yet because it's not winter yet. It's autumn in Australia, but hopefully we can knock this thing on the head before winter and keep it contained. What's going on? Alexander, in the UK, we cannot seem to find where to buy a tin lap. Any recommendations? Gee, I don't know. Look, you may need to go buy it, like in Australia. I do believe they send items overseas, so gem cuts. So the cost of postage to the UK, gem cuts is, in my opinion, one of the better suppliers in Australia, and you can buy, pretty much a standard tin lap from them. Now, with my tin lap, it's a bonded lap. So a bonded lap means that there's two sheets of metal. One, I believe, underneath is a type of aluminium alloy based metal, and then on top you'll have about 5 millimeters of bonded tin. Now, when I say tin, it's not pure tin. It's got amalgam of lead in it. So this lap here the surface is extremely soft. So it's not like a zinc lap where they are really hard. I've got a couple of zinc laps I bought really cheap, and I need to get those off to the engineer down the road and get them mirror smooth. He's got to mill those. I don't like any of my laps to be scoured. I like them to be as smooth as possible, and that includes cerium laps. I don't know what this thing is about scouring laps. And my mentor, who's been faceting for a whole lifetime, he was the guy who taught me. He actually polishes on a copper lap, solid copper lap, and he polishes quartz on copper laps with a diamond paste, and his lap is mirror smooth. So in the last decade or so, everybody seems to want to scour their lap, and there's so many different ways of doing it. And to me, that's just offering more confusion to the industry in itself for us recreational gem cutters. Okay, I'll just read a few more comments, and what I'm going to do is start polishing. Purple Space Cow, sorry if you already said, but what sort of gem is on the Dopstick right now? It's amethyst. So I've been working on this amethyst for weeks now, and it's a huge gem, but I've just been busy doing stuff around the house and a bit of gardening. And this is supposed to be a competition gem, but I'm not so sure, because when you're sort of doing these live streams and you're editing and doing videos when you're cutting gems, it's not the best situation to be cutting a competition gem in. Little mistakes can occur. Who knows, a mistake might happen today. So if you're faceting for competitions, I would not advise you to be videoing the whole operation. Hello, Chris Stokes. How's it going in the UK, Sunderland? I hope all is well with you guys. I'm really concerned that I haven't heard from some of my subscribers for a few weeks, and a lot of people who are gem cutters tend to be elderly, so I hope everyone is okay. Okay, we're going to get started, and to explain what's going on, these facets on this gem. Now, the average size are really big. They measure approximately 12 millimeters by 4 millimeters. So we are dealing with a very large facet. So I'm working on the pavilion, and I've already completed 3/4 of the facets. Now, I just don't know whether this webcam's not the best. One day I may get a better one, but basically I've got these 3 facets to polish. All the others are done. Now, what I'm going to be doing with this gem, because it is supposed to be a competition gem, and what I've been doing lately to explain this to explain what I'm doing. Normally, when I facet a gem, I'll just cut all these facets of pavilion facets down to depth. Usually do a pre-polish, and then I'll cut in, say, the next pavilion facets to a center point, up to pre-polish, then the girdle outline to pre-polish, and then I'll polish to the final polish in one go. This is a little bit different, so I'll be polishing each stage fully. So, for example, these are the P1 facets, which are just temporary, by the way. So I've gone to the pre-polish, then I'll do a final polish, then I'll go to the next stage, which will be the P2 facets, cutting to the center point here, and I'll polish those to then the girdle. Now, this is a method that some people do, and I've found it to be a lot more accurate, particularly on these competition gems. You just get less mistakes and more accuracy. If I was just cutting this for my wife, or just for a gem that I want to, give away to a friend, it's a non-competition gem, I wouldn't do it this way, because this is painstaking, this process. It's a lot slower. So I'll just read out a few more comments and we'll get started. Ricky says, have you tried a bat lap from Gearloose? No, I would love to try a bat lap. They're a lot harder than the tin laps. I would believe they'd actually facet maybe a little bit sharper. You get a lot sharper edges on it. So I would like to try one, but I'm trying to keep the costs down too. I don't want to end up with 10 or 15 polishing laps, and then you do find yourself, when you've got so many laps, you're only ever going to use 1 or 2 for most gems, so it's going to be a huge overpay. And that's one of the messages I'm trying to tell everyone. If you're getting into faceting and you want to learn facets at some point, you need to keep the cost down, unless you're really wealthy. You can just afford to buy anything, but at the end of the day, you just want to stick to your basic tools, your basic laps, because you'll find that most of them you won't use. So in my case, I just use these topper laps, which are these ones. And sometimes I'll use a Perspex lap, not often these days. But basically, topper laps, I'm using my copper lap quite regularly now. So if that works on most gems, I'll use that. And then I'll just stick with me. I'll just read out a few more comments. Paul, pre-polish or jump straight to polish? Yeah, you got to do depending on the gem, you know what? You can, with a topaz, you can use a 1200 or worn 1200 topper lap, or even a 3000. And it's not a great pre-polish as you would get with the copper lap, but on a topaz, you can jump straight to a polish. Zircons tend to be the same. They are easy to polish, yet you just can't do that way with quartz, and particularly with some of the synthetic gems like cubic zirconia. They really demand a good pre-polish, else you can spend that much more time just trying to polish, and it's not worth the effort. Sure, you can jump from a regular topper lap, even an 800, which is not technically a pre-polish, but if it's really worn, that disc will become a pre-polished disc. But technically, yes, you can jump from it. What I've found with some of the topper laps, and this is something you'll learn if you're faceting, that on the surface of particularly synthetic gems or hard gems like sapphire, there will be a type of a sandblasted effect where the entire surface of the facet is looking like it's being sandblasted, lightly sandblasted, but it's totally even. So when you look at it with your loupe, you actually can't see any scratches except just a sandblast effect. If you ever see that effect, then you can go, in my opinion, straight to a final polish, because they're not real scratches. It's just a nice, smooth, coating, and that polish is really good. It's the scratches that become the issue. I don't use. Okay, so another question. So thank you for these questions. We have Stephen. Hi, Stephen. What about ceramic laps? And diamond. Look, I know nothing about ceramic laps, but once again, a ceramic lap to me is it's the same as bonded laps. I've been talking about bonded laps last time, particularly these lightning laps, where it's just a coating of cerium or a coating of zirconium oxide. It's been impregnated into resin, really. So these resin bonded laps, in my opinion, junk. Look, these ceramic laps, they might do a good job. I don't know. I've never used them. But some of these laps are a huge overpay. And all these things have been introduced probably in the last 20-odd years. Prior to that, there were just basically copper and tin. So you had your white metal laps like this, and then obviously copper. And then you would have your bonded diamond laps. And that was pretty much stock standard. And gem cutters 30 years ago were cutting beautiful gems, and even prior to that, if you look at diamond cutting, a lot of gem cutters would have a series of just copper laps. So each copper lap would be for the grades of diamond. And by the way, some of the good gem cutters I see, they haven't changed that. So every lap, for example, is a copper lap. So they might be using a 1000 grit diamond, then cut with that, then go to an 8000, then do 16,000, then on to a final polish. And that's a great way to cut a gem too. And the great thing about that, if each lap is the same thickness, you're not, you can just take the lap off quickly, clean it, put another lap on, put on a different type of diamond, and just start grinding away. I'll just read a few more questions. And hello, Lucy, how are you? I'll just see if there are anything I've missed on these questions. I'm not sure. I'm hoping a couple other subscribers can jump in. Hi, Heather. How's things going? Hello, Emmanuel. Okay, so what I'm going to try to avoid, because sometimes when I have these live streams, there are side comments between people and each other, and I don't want to get caught up in that. That's up to you if you're having a little conversation amongst each other. But from my point of view, that can be a little bit confusing looking at those side comments. So hello to Raphael. Hey, Raphael, how are you going, mate? Where do you live? What country are you residing in? I've been looking at Raphael's comments for a long time. He's been a subscriber. Hopefully he responds. Anyway, let's get started. Now, tin lap, bonded lap, very soft. So if you're ever using these bonded laps, you need to be specifically careful that you do not get them all scratched up and particularly get little indentations in them. But once you get that, they can be problematic because of the soft nature of the metal. So if that happens and you get little indentations everywhere, as it can happen because this gem can dig into the metal if you're unlucky, then you may need to take it to a machinist and get it re-milled. Polish and pre-polish cuts can move already meet points. Sorry, Paul has asked, polish and or pre-polish cuts can move already meet points. Well, you can. When you're doing a pre-polish, you do want to have meet points. Sometimes when I leave them just shy of the meet point because you can actually polish them in. Depends on the situation, and it depends whether you're polishing from the culet or you're polishing from the girdle line down to the culet. Different methods. Let me just see. Hi, Carlene. How are you going? Okay, Cam's Adventures. Any recommended Australian machines? I've got to tell you that my next machine most likely will be a Gem Master once they're in production. But I was having a conversation with one of my mentors, the guy who taught me. And to be honest, and I'm going to put this message out there for any Australian engineer and you enjoy faceting, I reckon we are on a downhill slide with our machines. It's becoming more obsolete technology. The Taiwanese machine, the Dreamer, very simplistic design, by the way. It is killing everyone in terms of high quality gem cuts in international competitions. So the Taiwanese gem cutters are getting 100-point stones consecutively. And that is almost unheard of. So in the last international faceting competition, the Taiwanese gem cutters are kicking Australian and US and UK butts seriously. And it's all because of their machine. Now, we have pretty much let our guard down in this country in terms of high quality faceting machines. And a lot of the machines that are doing a good job are reconditioned old machines like a Halls 2000. And at some point, those machines aren't going to last forever. So I'm hoping that at some point we can sort of lift our game with machines because the VJ machine, although it's supposed to be a very good Australian machine, the actual plate does the opposite. Instead of this faceting head coming down, lowering onto the plate this way, the VJ is opposite. The faceting head virtually is stable and the plate raises up. And to me, that's just for most gem cutters who've been working opposite where the mast is lowering the head down, it's really like driving on the other side of the road. I'm not prepared to relearn every part of my faceting technique just so the plate can lift up to the gem, the opposite. I think personally it's a dumb idea, but those people who are used to the VJ, it's a great machine if you're starting from scratch. Then you won't have any issues. But once again, look, the VJ is one of those companies that's taken over by someone else. It's actually taken over, I believe, by the son-in-law of the original owner. Now, this is happening with lots of companies in Australia. Those people don't really probably have a real vested interest in faceting. So you can see that if you don't have a real interest in the hobby, you could honestly see that the machine will not be the best machine, and servicing of that machine will not be the best. You really want to be buying machines from people who have a real interest in the game, in the hobby. Okay, a few more questions. I've got to start. Okay, so we're getting side comments now. Okay, hello to Chuck. How are you going? Look, Raphael, polishing disc for emerald? I would say tin lap. I mean, emerald is part of the, I believe, the corundum family, so it's going to be hard, pretty hard type of gem. Sapphires polish well on tin. Okay, I'm going to get started and we'll see how I go. Now, the index I'm going to facet on is index 72. These are going to be huge facets, as I mentioned prior to before most of you came on. It's a 12 millimeter by 4 millimeter facet. Really huge. Don't expect to polish a facet that large in a few minutes. If you do, you've got very lucky, but it's not going to happen. So going back to how I do this process, and as I mentioned earlier, my patrons have got a special video. So if you want to become a patron, you are quite welcome to receive that video. But the technique I'm going to use is not to go polish the facet all in one go. I'm going to take it in little steps, particularly with large facets. How you going, Joshua? Good morning. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a prep. Now, I've got to say this, that if you're polishing quartz, try to get this Herco valve oil. It's actually not too expensive. About, well, if you live in the UK or US, it'll be cheaper than Australia, but it's $8.99 in Australia. So you probably pay $4 in the US in a music shop. You get this in music shops because it's designed for the valves on trumpets and clarinets, so they don't jam up. It keeps them lubricated. Not technically designed for gem cutting, but because I work in the music industry and I teach music, I thought one day I'd give this a go and see what happened. And just by the luck of the gods, it did a great job on quartz. Now, this type of oil, I'll just spin it around. I'll just read it out to you, what grade it is. Hang on. Okay, because it various grades of this stuff. One moment. Where is it? I can't find it. Okay, so it's HE448. So probably all types of valve oils good. So this one is Herco HE448 valve oil. Now this oil is a lot in viscosity. It's a lot thinner than the sewing machine oil or snake oil or traditional oils. So what happens when you put it on the lap, and I'm only going to put about 5 or 6 drops, just enough to get it lubricated. Don't over lubricate it. But the thing is, because the viscosity of this is very thin, it really absorbs well into the pores of the tin. Now, believe it or not, all laps are porous. So the word is porosity. It absorbs oil and it will absorb the diamond. So this is your 50,000 diamond dust, diamond grist. And another thing, like, buy quality diamond grit. This is for it's called De Beers. So it comes from that company and it's a high quality. So we just apply a little bit. So just a little bit. And that's all I'm going to use. Tip my finger. And then I just dab it on to the disc. Like that. Now, the thing is, I've got some on my finger, so I'm going to wipe it off. So we don't want contamination. Now, what happens, this cloth is damp, and then wipe it off and just find a clean bit on the other side. And then when I've finished polishing my session, hey, John, how are you going? Finally made it. Well done. So when you've finished polishing your facet or facets after a session, I actually clean this cloth out because it's full of diamond residue and grease and all sorts of things. The thing is, I don't want this finger with any contamination anyway. So what I'm going to do, I'll just move that. And I'm going to have to wipe my finger again because I got caught up looking at questions. So once again, you're going to have that. Just wipe it off because we don't want it on the quill head, touching the quill head or getting into your index gears. And at this stage, it's not too bad. Now, so what I'm going to do first, I've got it on index 72, and I haven't altered anything with the protractor since I've cut my last facet, which was index 64. So I'm going to just slowly, it's not touching, but I'm just going to lower gently till it starts to touch the flat of the facet, just touches the actual surface of the disc, and it's just touching now. So because the disc has got grease on it, as I rotate, I can actually see the contact area. I know this is not a great camera, but what I'll do, just to show you that the grease has sort of come up halfway to the facet, and that's telling me that's making contact from the culet halfway down to the base. So from a beginner's point of view, and I did show this on a private video, which is a lot clearer than this webcam, I'll wipe off that grease. So I know I'm making pretty good contact already on that facet. If you are a beginner, you're going to have to get a highlighter, color in that facet you wish to polish, because the first thing you want to do is find out what's going on before you actually start polishing. So I'm back to index 72 in my case, and I'll lift up my mask and gently lower till we make a contact, and just rub on the surface. You're not going to do any damage to your lap unless you've literally chosen the wrong index and you've got the protractor angle set at such a different range that, yeah, surely it may dig in. So I'm going to rub it and then just go rotate it. Just wipe gently the grease off, and what'll happen, you'll see where the actual black eraser is wiped out. So I can see that it's probably not great on this webcam, but you can see where it's wiped it out. So that tells me that where that culet is, it will be polished. So I'll do that now and then have another look. So I'm going to lift the mask up and just go slowly down. Make sure you've got the right index and just go nice and smooth. Just take your time. And because there's enough diamond on there, it's pretty fresh, and so is the oil. It hasn't dried out. I'm just going to have a look at it. And at this point, I'll get my loop and just see where I'm going. And you know what? This is the same as last night when I made a video the other day. I have to cheat slightly to the left. Hang on, I'll just have another look. Yeah, so this is, no, I've got to cheat slightly to the right on this one, not much. So this is my cheater here, this little knob. So to cheat right, I'm just going to turn anti-clockwise, actually. So yeah, anti-clockwise in my case. And I've just done a little bit. I'll go back to index 72. I'm pretty confident I've nailed it. So I'm going to lower my mast. Just go slow. I'm just lowering as I'm polishing. And notice I'm not going too heavy-handed. I'm not, rough. Go slow and gentle. You want to sort of work out where you're at with this facet polishing. So I'm going to turn off, have another look, see if everything is looking good. And yep, it's good. I could probably go slightly more to the right. So I'm going to just tweak it a little bit. Now, this is very fine adjustments you're making. You're not really going that far right at all. Probably 1/10 of a millimeter, if that, on the facet. It's just so ever so slight adjustment. But I want that polish to be central on the facet. I don't want it to be to the left side of the facet or right. I want it to be right down the center, because as I start lowering towards the base of this gem, that means the entire surface should be in the center. Now, you will come across white patches. Sometimes you got to tweak left or right on the cheater to get rid of that white patch. So I'm just going to continue on. Now, I can see when I looked at it last time that had polished halfway down the facet. My intention is to go down to the base. Now, as I'm doing this oil is starting to dry out a bit. I can feel it drying out. And that's when it does. It's real magic, in my opinion, as it slowly dries out. Now, I've gone halfway down the facet line. I don't know whether that anyone can see it, but maybe I can get a close up, coming closer. It might be a bit better. Hang on. So it's a bit hard to see. I've got to get a better webcam. But basically what's happened in this case, I've polished halfway down to the facet here. So that means I've still got a fair way to go. Now, I probably don't need to go all the way down to this base here. The reason being is that this section of the gem, actually, it looks like that's got worse. Bring it back more. This section of the gem here, which will become the girdle outline, I'll be cutting away. But for demonstration purposes, I'll be probably polishing right up to that seam. Now, it's getting a bit drier now, so I can just see by the surface that it's got a different texture. You can probably see that. It's looking a bit drier. So what I'm going to do, you can actually, when the disc is running, just put the oil on. Now, this oil is really thin, so once again, you're doing this type of method. As it's going and you notice it's drying out, you can just drop a few drops on. I'm putting 3 or 4. Just rub it in. So the oil's pretty fresh, and so is the diamond. Get my finger over there. Now, once again, because I've touched my lap, clean that finger. Get rid of any diamond or grease off your finger. Now, I'm going to go down a little bit lower on that facet. Okay. I'm actually winding down because I want to cut or polish down to depth now. Now, what I recommend, my disc is going clockwise. I would never recommend going against the grain or going anti-clockwise. You don't want this gem to dig into your tin lap if you're going on this side. So don't go beyond the spindle if you can help it, or even to the center point. That I actually don't go near that center point, because once you start going too close to the spindle and central, you're actually in no man's land. You're not even going clockwise or anti-clockwise. It's sort of just going anywhere in the same direction. I don't want it to dig in. So just go nice and slow. Once again, I'm going to do a check of this facet, see where I'm going. And this is a thing. I'm always constantly using toilet paper. Now, the reason why I'm using toilet paper is because it absorbs any grease really quickly. And at the moment, well, it's not a lot of it around, but generally speaking, it's pretty cheap. So I'm just going to check this facet. And I can see that it's really going well. I could probably tweak it a little bit more to the right, to be honest. So that facet is starting to look good. A bit hard to see in the camera. So I've tweaked a little bit more to the right. I'm going to continue. Now, if you were a commercial faceter, you would probably almost stop where I am now, because I'm getting a pretty good polish on that. And that would probably be enough for most faceters, to be honest. But if this is a competition gem, there's bound to be micro scratches in it. Yeah, and I can see there's a little patch in it also. So I can actually see where the patch is. Hasn't quite, I'll just mark it. It's just a little patch right in the center, right about there, a white patch. Now, that's going to be one of the things you're going to find. You'll get little micro scratches, little patches, things like that, particularly on a large facet. And this is a very large facet. So I know where it is. So I'm going to raise my mask up a little bit and see if I can just wipe that out. So because I've gone down to the base of the gem, I'm looking at my mast height. Mine's got little numerals on it. And so I was up around about 9. So I'm just going to raise it back up to 6 and just see how I go. You get a fairly good idea roughly where you are on the facet. Now, I'm going to try to get rid of that white patch. Just take your time. If you can get through a very large facet like this within 20 minutes, you'll be doing okay. If it was a table, facet and it's a huge one, say 10 millimeters by 10 millimeters, you wouldn't expect to get it polished within 5 minutes, to be quite honest. If it's a tiny little table facet, it may take you only, 2 or 3 minutes if it's very tiny. But the large facets really do need a lot of time spent with them. Now that has taken away that white patch beautifully. So there was a little white patch, and I know it's not showing too well on this camera, but basically if I get this out, the white patch was there, and I raised my mask up a little bit and it's got rid of it. Now there's a few little micro scratches down here towards the culet, and there's a little bit up here like white patch, but I'm kind of not too worried about the one up here because that's going to be faceted away later when I cut this girdle outline. So that is not an issue. So I'm going to turn it off now. Now this is one of the things. The facet looks really good, and if I was a commercial polisher, I would say good enough, I'll go on to the next facet. But because I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I think most faceters who are recreational faceters, you're cutting because you enjoy the hobby, but you want to cut a really world-class gem. And I want to cut better gems than you can buy in a jewelry shop, to be honest, mainly because, my wife will probably get them. So, and a couple of friends. So you want to do a good job. And if you're a perfectionist, as most faceters are, then it would be really annoying to have, a half-baked gem full of little scratches, little white patches on the surface, chips, all that sort of stuff. That's the way it is as a recreational faceter. You've got to have that element of perfection. So at this stage, I know there's a few little tiny micro scratches, and I'm going to deal with those. So what I'm going to do, because I've already done the bulk of the polishing on this surface, it's time for me to recharge it. Now, I could keep going, but I don't want to. Not to save diamond, it's really because this has already got, it probably got micro shards off from this gem. It's so tiny you wouldn't even notice. Not only that, the diamond paste, diamond grit is getting worn, so it's not quite doing the job as initially, even in that short time when I was polishing. So time to recharge, because I know this surface here will start to scratch more and more, because the more I use it, you get this black residue building up from the tin and the diamond and contaminants, and it's just going to lead to more micro scratches. So at this point, this is where you got to just take little steps. I'm going to clean this lap, and once again, clean toilet paper. I'm using WD-40. Now, I was recommended by one of my subscribers to use lanolin. This is just your regular, I think it's like a petroleum-based, synthetic petroleum-based type of product. It's stinky, and I don't like using it because of the nature of its stinkiness, and it's not good for your lungs. So if you've got really bad lungs, you need to be disposing of this product in the right way, particularly if you're working indoors. So I'm just going to clean my lap, and I'm building up. You see that black residue? This is the stuff you want to get off. This is the stuff that, in my opinion, most faceters will agree, it causes those little micro scratches. Okay, so because it's on that surface, I don't want to go rubbing it back on, because basically you're impregnating into the soft tin all that, garbage. So you don't. So turn over, apply some more lubricant, which is WD-40, and clean again. This is painstakingly fastidious, and for a lot of people, it probably would annoy you to do this, but it really is the way to do it. So yeah, you can see the blackness coming out towards the edge, and that's that. So if there's any more clean, I'll turn over and apply more lubricant. It's really important to do this process. Hey Ray, how you going? I'm probably missing quite a few people who joined. And see how it's getting cleaner. But now basically that tissue is full. I'm going to ditch it now. So just to let you know, when you're dealing with this product, keep this handy. You want to be putting it into a sealed plastic bag because this stuff is really nauseous when you start breathing in the fumes. So keep it sealed in a bag and you'll be right. Okay, so I'll just pop that there for a moment. It stops all those fumes from going into the room. Now, another piece of clean toilet paper. And I know, look, this is so pedantic. Once again, we want to charge, get that over here. Just load it up with a bit of WD-40 and just start cleaning again. The reason being that old piece of toilet paper with all gunk on it, we don't want to be wiping that back onto the surface. And after a while, it'll virtually, as you can see, there'll be very little residue. And once that occurs, then we are set to repolish. It's all about eliminating contamination, particularly during this polishing stage. I consider this black gunk to be a contaminant, and it creates all those little fine micro scratches. So I reckon that's good enough. So I'll do one more clean, and that's it. So I've cleaned my disc, and then I'll go on to polishing again. So once again, dispose of this stuff, guys. You don't want to be messing around with WD-40 fumes. So off you go. So once again, same process as before. Now I've had a bit of this black stuff on my fingers after cleaning. I'm going to wipe my hands down again because it could be contamination on my hands. So just flip that around where it's clean, and I'll use a clean side later on. So once again, we're going back to charging our lap. I usually apply about 5 drops, 5 or 6. And once again, we just rub it into your lap, this Herco oil. And we do the same thing again. We're applying another fresh lot of diamond paste to the surface. Actually, that should be enough. Yep, that'll be good. And while I've got on my finger, I'm actually not putting my finger anywhere on this. I'm just sort of opening with other fingers, keeping this finger isolated because of the nature of the diamond and grease on my finger. And even when I turn on my lap, I won't use this finger. I'm not going to hit the switch down over here. You know, I don't want diamond paste all over my fastening machine. So I'll be using other fingers. Once again, get it all, you know, charged up. Now you can use, some people actually use like a bit of plastic. They run it along like that. I think my finger's fine. It's really just keeping your fingers clean. So once again, wipe. And I've got on my thumb, wipe, wipe, wipe. That's done with that. So now the whole point is that I had micro scratches on this gem. So I go back to my index 72. Make sure when you're changing indexes, you get the right index. The last thing you want to be doing is hitting the wrong index and go and burrowing straight into your tin lap. That will cause all sorts of issues with your lap. Believe me, it'll scratch it. So I'm going to go back. I will start lifting my mask again. I'm going to start back from the culet, and I'm just touching now. Now, remember before, I remembered on my depth gauge here that it was number 9. So I'm just going to lower slowly, and I'll go all the way back to number 9. Again, just very slow. I'll just stick there for a minute, and I'll be going down to the base of my gem, which will be technically the girdle outline later on, and just go slowly. Now, because this lap has been recharged, this diamond will be a lot more aggressive now than previously when it was worn before I changed it out. And just take your time, hold the gem. You don't need to apply much downward force. This is starting to dry out. I can feel it drying out. So you'll get the feel of this, and I'll have another look at it now. Turn off. clean. Now, this is another aspect when you're cleaning your gem. Try to keep some denatured alcohol available. We call this methylated spirits in the US, I think. UK, they call denatured alcohol. Now, what I've done, I'm going to toss that in a moment. So that hasn't got any WD-40 on it, so I can keep that side down below here. But what I want to do is get another clean piece of toilet paper. So fastidious, but I'm going to clean down my gem properly, because what happens when you wipe it down after you've touched the grease and the diamond, what happens, the grease tends to smear over the really over the perfectly polished facets, and particularly the one you're doing. So that will look like a scratch on the surface of the gem, and you think, gee, I've got a bit of a scratch, or there's an imperfection, and it's just a grease smear. And the last thing you want to do is try to repolish over a beautifully polished surface because you think you've seen something that's not really there. So I'm just having a look at the loop now. Sorry, that is almost perfect. I think it is perfect. Just a few flecks of dust. Now, normally, if you're looking, you go like that. Sometimes you don't need to. Depends on the light in your room. Sometimes I'll keep it that. What you try and do is get the angle of the light in the right position. Now, I'm using a fairly low wattage light here. It's only about 30 watts, so it's not too bright. And this is a discussion I had with several other members the other day. If your light is too bright, it will reflect off the surface of the facet you've just polished, and you can't see anything, because as you're looking through the loop like that, it's just too much reflection going on, and it becomes really dazzling. So I'm just going to look now, and I can see there's still a few little micro scratches, and it's in the same area as before where that light patch was. So I've actually marked it. So what I've done, I've marked the area where I can see micro scratches halfway up the facet right there. So because I've been taking those of my height adjuster, once again, I've gone down to number 9. So that's taken it right down, the polish down to the base, but the micro scratch is a little bit in the middle. It's a couple there. So that means I've got to lift up my mask and just get into that zone. So this has dried out quite a bit. So I've got some dirt on my finger, I've noticed. So I'm going to wipe that off. So by now, this has dried out. This oil really does dry out rapidly. So I'm going to recharge it a bit with oil. Let's just put a few drops on, wipe it on, and just rub it in so it's lubricated again. Clean your finger. It's on my other hand, but still clean it. Go back to the index I was working on, index 72. Now, because the mask has been lowered, I'm going to bring it up now. So I'm starting from the base and lifting up slowly. This will not create a ghost facet, by the way. Now I'm going to bring it up to number 6. But I kind of know where it is just by lifting it up. There we go, nice and slow. Now, I just wonder whether some faceting machines you can actually move your mask at the same time you're polishing. Sometimes you can't. So I'm going to just sit it there, because actually I know that's right in the center of that facet, and take my time. Nothing to go. Don't get too heavy-handed. And this facet will virtually be polished by now. I could almost guarantee it. So I'm going to have a quick look. Once again, go through the same process of cleaning it. Hey, Stephen, welcome back. Using this, that'll get rid of all the grease. So I'm just going to check under the loop. Yeah, that's great. That's worked really well. So that's it. That is that facet done. I don't know how long that took, probably 15 or 20 minutes. That's a perfectly clean facet. No micro scratches anymore. So I've got 2 more left. Now these 2 facets, this one here is a lot bigger than the one next to it, simply because the girdle outline here is creating it to be quite wide over this point. So I might just have a little break and just read some of the questions. So that went pretty well. Sometimes you get a facet, and I'm going to tell you this, you can have a real issue with a scratch you can't get rid of. It just happens to be on a certain point of the facet that you just, for whatever reason, the polish, the surface of your disc is not quite hitting that spot. Sometimes you're going to have to fiddle a little bit with your protractor, lift it up, lower it up, or bring it down. But I shouldn't laugh. Someone's written a funny comment. I should use Jaws as tail. Yeah, but sometimes you're going to have to move around with the protractor, do micro adjustments on it. So mine's got a little micro adjuster. All faceting protractors will have that. So in this case, I'm sort of polishing this facet at 45 degrees. Sometimes you might have to move it to 45.1 degrees or 44.9 just to get onto that little spot you just can't sort of hit. And that's where the art of faceting really does take place, particularly with polishing, is understanding how you can make these little fine adjustments. I'm going to have a bit of a sip of tea, and then I'll read some of these comments. So Luke says, I like to use microfiber glasses cloths. Yeah, I've used them before, reusable. They can get, you can, I've used microfiber. I tend to use toilet paper. It just seems to absorb the grease better. The microfiber, in my opinion, I reckon it's not a great cloth, and I've used them. It just doesn't absorb water, or particularly WD-40 or the Herco Valve Oil. It's something I don't like. That's why I like using the toilet paper. A lot of Australian facetters tend to use toilet paper, but by golly, it's becoming a luxury later. I tell you what, I might have to start sort of just splitting the plies apart to save toilet paper, because I tell you what, there's not much of it around the supermarkets. Now, when you start the next facet, you don't want to be starting with your old diamond. This, in my opinion, it's done the job on this facet. Look, you could be stingy and say, well, I'll go into another facet and I'll polish that. In my opinion, I probably wouldn't. There's still plenty of diamond on there I could use, but it will have contaminants in it, because you'll notice now when I clean it, even though it looks fairly clean, you're dealing with black residues. And I kind of think, just because you're starting a new facet, you don't want to drag anything into that facet like a big scratch, because once you get a decent sized scratch on that facet after you've pre-polished it, you could pretty much say you're going to spend an extra 20 minutes or more. So clean it a bit more. So as you can see, it's quite a bit of gunk on there. And the thing is, when you are using diamond grit, it embeds into the surface of the soft tin or any tin. And as you're polishing it, it becomes worn. So that diamond just is still embedded in your lap, and that's why I'm wiping a lot of it out. But it becomes worn, and once it's worn, it becomes a useless product. So it sits there, you're polishing away, going, gee, it's not doing a lot, because you've worn the diamond out, and you've been wiping it away each time you scrub across with the gem, and then you're wiping the gem. So more diamond is being removed, but still some is in there that's useless. And really you want to drag that out by cleaning it, because it's going to serve no purpose at all, to be honest. So this is dirty. Same thing again. Bag it. Start with a fresh piece of toilet paper. Clean again. It's all about just going over the same little things, but all these little things matter. Now, a lot of people won't bother. They'll take these little shortcuts. I reckon once you start taking little shortcuts, you're adding more workload long term. What you're trying to avoid is scratching the surface with something, because that will add so much more time to the whole job. Now, the side of your lap, the tin lap, so needs to be cleaned also, because once again, oil will run down the side, and you don't want anything getting in the pan and stuff like that. So keep it nice and clean. Now that lap, see how clean that is now. So this lap is nicely prepped up to be charged again with the Herco and new diamond paste to start off another facet. That's a big facet. Probably took me 15, 20 minutes. To do the other two might take another half an hour or 40 minutes. But to be honest, the bulk of the work on the pavilion has already been done, because once I cut these TP2 facets in, they're going to be very tiny. They won't take a lot of polishing, and the time to do that will be so little compared to what I've already done. Once you get into the crown, after you form the girdle and you've done the transfer, the crown goes a lot quicker than these huge pavilion facets, to be quite honest. For some reason, most of the work, particularly on a gem this size, is dealing with the first set of pavilion facets, cutting those to depth. Sometimes it takes a long time just to remove material if you're unlucky, particularly on hard gems like CZ. You've got a huge piece of CZ, and just to grind away material can be painstaking with certain gems. Okay, I'm going to read some questions, and we'll see what people say. I might have to scroll up, just get rid of that. Now, the other thing too, your work area needs to be very clean. Might discuss that in a minute. I'll just go up. How many people I've got? I'll see how many people I've got on board. It must be somewhere where it tells me this. I can't find it. I'll just scroll up and just see what people have been saying for one moment. Okay, Joshua says, thin oil, would you only use it on quartz? Actually, I'd use the thin oil on anything now, to be honest, only because it retains that diamond and absorbs a lot better. I use sewing machine oil. What I've done also, if I particularly on a gem that's easier to polish, because quartz is not that easy to polish compared to other gems, maybe I would use a little bit of sewing machine oil in combination with the Herco valve oil, only so it doesn't dry out as quick and you just go through the facets a lot quicker in polishing. This stuff dries out really quick, but that's when it starts drying out, that combination of the dryness really seems to tear into the polishing surface of that facet, removing little scratches and things like that. So yeah, I'd probably use sewing machine oil or other oils, but on quartz, no way. I would only use the Herco. What else? So Ray is from Alaska. Gee, hope all is going well in Alaska for you, Ray. Hello to K Sarah from Colorado. No, I'm not going to use Jaws' tail. He won't like me if I use his tail for cleaning or any other faceting purpose. Geek Life, welcome. Paul, sometimes I get a big, what's that, scratch or swarf in, oh yes, sometimes I get a big scratch in some part of the lap, some point of the lap. How do you fix that? To be honest, you probably might have to take it to the local milling shop, get an engineer to put it on a lathe and mill it smooth. I've tried to fix up my own laps when I've dug into it occasionally, and I've wasted my time. It really needs to be put on a lathe and properly re-milled. It costs about $20 in Australia when I go down the road. It only takes him 10 minutes to do it. But that is long-term the best solution. What happens, even if you don't have a scratch, after a while your surface area of the lap will start to dish out, because this area here is the area you tend to use. You don't tend to use too much of the lap on the outer surface, outer edge, and you definitely don't use much of the lap on the inner edge where the spindle is. So it starts to dish out a little bit because of the soft nature of the alloy. And after a while, it'll dish out that much that it becomes ineffective. So then I take it down to my local engineer down the road, and he'll mill it for me. It doesn't cost much, and for just all the headaches, you spend all these extra hours trying to polish, and you just find you need a very flat surface. So I'll keep reading questions. I wonder how Marvel Mystery Oil would work. Have no idea. I mean, these are all the things like, and this is when it comes to learning how to facet, there may be for some people a lot of experimentation going on. There may well be a better oil around that's 10 times better than Herco for polishing quartz. And that's really up to the person, like as a faceter. If you think there's something better, don't be scared to give it a go. I've tried various oils and different compounds, and they all do a reasonable good job, some better than others, obviously. But someone might find some wonder combination of oil and the right balance of diamond, and it really might be the best thing ever invented. So as a gem cutter, don't be scared to have a go and learn different techniques and find out what is around there. I do think when it comes to these new laps, particularly these resin bonded laps, it's quite obvious when you just have a surface that you never have to recharge. Eventually that surface is going to wear down, and the polishing and the cutting is going to diminish with every time you use or cut a new gem. And to me, eventually that lap will cause more and more issues as it becomes more worn. I just cannot possibly see that these resin bonded laps with cerium or zirconium oxide, they are a short-term polishing method. They do a great job for maybe half a dozen times or more. Then all of a sudden it becomes a very much an expensive throwaway item. Okay, hello, Garrett. He asked a question. I'm going to answer these questions. He says, when polishing, is it better to use pressure or a finer compound to keep the edges sharp? Well, that's actually a good question. I think, in my opinion, it's what creates the finer edges is not so much digging deep into your lap. What you're trying to do is create the flat of your facet. And what it's a bit hard to explain, but you're trying to get the diamond to float between the tin lap and the facet. And so as it's floating between there, diamond is cutting the surface area of the facet. It's all about the diamond floating between that facet. And that's why when I'm faceting, I'm just sort of going like this. I'm not pushing too hard. That is actually creating the sharp edge, not so much this surface of this lap, in my opinion. This is actually soft. So if you're going to dig in deep, you kind of expect that you're going to get round edges because of the soft nature of some of these alloys. So I actually think it's a bit like when you're doing your final cut and polish on the car. You actually, the last final cut and polish on the car, you're getting a very fine rag and you're lightly taking off, that last coating. You're not actually cutting much away. It's actually that you're just polishing that surface. And it's kind of similar, if that's a good analogy. You're trying to float the diamond between the facet and the surface of the disc. And that's what's creating a sharp facet. I think maybe the opposite. If you press too hard, it's going to round out a facet. So that's my opinion. What happens on a Perspex lap, the cerium is actually creating rounding, and you'll notice on these ultraspectral apps, because that's a soft base also, using a plastic, what I think is happening is that the cerium is embedded in the plastic. So people do by nature press hard, and as you press into the plastic, it's dishing out a little bit on the edges of the facet, and that's rounding out your facets. Cerium oxide does have a habit of rounding out facets because it's a lot coarser, and the diamond compound is a lot finer. So that fineness of the diamond compound, and good question about the fineness. People say that if you use 100 grit, you even get sharper facets, 100 grit diamond, because of the nature of the fine particles are just making the edges a little bit sharper. Really excellent question that is. And scientifically, it would be good to get a really good micro, a macro cam to see close up what's really happening. But in my opinion, it's the floating of the diamond between the facet and the lap that's doing the actual cutting. Read a few more questions. How to use a grinder? What type of grinder? I mean, are you talking about how to use a faceter? This is from Terry. How to use a faceter, I've got multiple videos on how I use my faceting machine. Maybe you want to rephrase that question. Okay, I'll just see if there's any other questions. So those people who are faceters, have you had problems polishing? I'd like to know how many people are struggling with the polishing. Yeah, I don't know. Application grinder. Don't know. Sorry, I don't understand that question. Okay, Yuri, Frino, you had lots of trouble. So what aspect is it you just can't find the right type of combination? So Yuri, what type of disc do you have? What type of polishing disc, and what type of polishing medium are you using? Are you using cerium oxide? Are you using diamond? Are you using bonded laps, resin laps? What are you using, mate? Just see if Yuri comes back. No difference. Like, okay, I've found that cerium and perspex works best. So, look, to be honest, cerium and perspex on quartz is, in my opinion, a very fast method. It's, if you can use it well, it's great. I've kind of at times struggled. It's hit and miss for me, particularly if you get a little chip that comes off the quartz. What happens? I end up with massive scratches. It gets dragged underneath the facet, and then you're going to have to sort of pre-polish the entire facet. It's no doubt that cerium is faster than diamond. I've found using the Herco pretty fast, to be honest. But if you're happy with the cerium and perspex, and you know how to use it and keep the swarf away, that's good. How's Jaws coping with you being on lockdown? Well, Jaws is in the other room with my wife at the moment. I actually want to take Jaws down to the local quarry. It's been raining for 3 or 4 days, and I haven't been out of the house much for over a week, to be honest, in this lockdown, and it's slowly driving me nuts. Must be driving everyone nuts, particularly if the weather's bad. But yeah, he kind of likes it because we're home a lot now, but I think he needs a walk. Okay, Popo, hello. How you going, Popo? Popo Momo 12. Oh, so you're at work. Yeah, if you're at work, some of you guys are pretty lucky because that's not the situation I'm in. I feel sorry for everyone who's out of work also. Just reading some of the questions, guys. Sorry, I'm just reading. Okay, so I'm going to be finishing soon. If anyone's got any more questions, we've gone through the process of polishing a facet, and if I polish another facet, then I'm just doing exactly the same as I did before. I think what I've tried to explain today mainly is be aware of contamination. You see me go for all these little steps, as painstaking and as boring and pedantic as it can be. It's really the way to go when you're polishing. You're just eliminating anything that can possibly go wrong during the process. Okay. Terry says he's in lockdown and the only cutting tool he has is a shiv. How do I get a facet machine into a prison? Yeah. I tell you what, in Australia, it would be almost impossible to get a faceting machine into a prison, full stop, because it's almost impossible to get a half decent faceting machine when you're not in prison, because there's not many manufacturers around anymore who are making them. To be honest, as I said earlier, we need to lift our game in Australia when it comes to getting those people who make faceting machines to getting an interest in making them like they used to, not to think about potential dollars that could be made by selling a few here and there. Things a lot better off, I think, in the US when it comes to faceting machines being made currently. Really, at the end of the day, buying a 30-year-old faceting machine and having to get it overhauled, which costs just as much money as buying a brand new, I don't see any benefits with buying such machines. You just can't get the right parts for them anymore, and we're better off to have maybe like Facetron, a machine that does the job and you always can get parts for, and really it's a reliable machine. What we're dealing with at the moment are old machines being refurbished, and it's a little bit like, having an old car. It's only so long you can keep looking after an old car before it's due for the dustbin. Polishing like Andy Diffra. Yeah. Okay. Any questions? I just see Popo. Popo said something about a lawyer. I have no idea what he's talking about. Okay, Geek Life says he's a newbie and his teacher agrees with me in the class to lighten the touch. And that is really one of the hardest things for most people to do, is have a light touch with faceting. The mindset is, when you're faceting, that the harder you push in, the more material you're going to remove quicker. And when polishing, the mindset is the harder you press, that the quicker the polishing process will be going, because the entire surface of the facet on the pre-polish has this milky white residue, particularly when you look with a loupe, and you kind of think, oh, you've got to polish that away. And the only way you're going to get rid of it is by applying pressure, lots of pressure, when in fact it's the opposite. You're trying to float that diamond between the surface of the lap and the surface of the facet. And it's that floating of the diamond that's actually working quicker than the pressure. So lightening of the touch is really such an important part of faceting. If you were a commercial faceter, I've noticed a lot of commercial faceters, they are extremely aggressive. Whether they think it's going to cut the gem quicker, maybe it does. But they don't care about the polished finish, because for a start, I will guarantee you on a commercial cut gem, you're going to see little scratches and little imperfections that you cannot see with the naked eye, but under a loupe, under magnification, you'll see it. So they don't care about any of that. They're only interested in, getting just a reasonable polish and just a reasonable finish on the gem. Okay, I don't know whether we have any more questions, but for those people who've joined in, I thank you. I'll keep reading. Yuri's got another question. He ended up building his own faceting machine. out of 2x4s, a bucket cheap mask quill on Amazon. So hopefully that's going well for you, Yuri, your home-built fastening machine. So Geek Life says he'd rather be a hobbyist rather than a perfectionist. Oh, sorry. He says he'd rather be a hobbyist who's a perfectionist than a commercial cutter who does a sloppy job. And to be honest, the thing is with hobbies and people who are recreational gem cutters, that's why we do it. We want to create a really high quality item, and that goes for any quality gem. Most of the best ones I think are being done by recreational cutters. John says jewelers hate it when you bring in your own loop. Oh, yes, they do. And I remember buying many years ago, this is going back nearly 20 years ago, before I got married, buying the engagement ring for my wife. We bought a diamond. I had it specially brought in because I said to the jeweler, who was a local jeweler, I said, I don't want any of this cheap stuff, that you get from Thailand and from all other countries, because I could even see back then that the quality wasn't that great. And I said, what about we import a nice diamond? And so he did import diamonds from Brussels. And then I got to look over them. And not only that, here's a little tip for all you guys who are getting married. You will save a fortune if you actually get an imported diamond and find a jeweler who does it and make a ring from scratch. So my wife's wedding ring, we just said, look, she liked that design at the time. He made it. It doesn't take long for a good jeweler to make the ring. How they do it, they centrifuge and they mold it and then do what they've got to do. But the quality of the diamond was really good. And even then, I brought in my loop. He didn't mind because he knew he had a pretty good diamond. And you go through, a good jeweler will explain the quality of a good diamond, the 3 C's, so carat weight, the cut. And what is the other C? Not sure. Can't remember. So there are 3 C's if you want to Google it. Carat, cut, and someone please help me. I've forgotten what the 3rd C is. Clarity is that's I was thinking of that word. So the clarity of the gem. Yeah, got to you before you. So yeah, clarity is the main thing too. Sometimes you'll have yellowy diamonds. You don't want those. Now the other thing I was going to mention, when you're cutting your gems, and I know there are some YouTube channels out there, they do not polish the actual girdle outline. To think that you cannot see an unpolished girdle outline, even if you're an amateur and you've never cut in your life, you've got to be kidding yourself if you think it doesn't have any effect on the gem. It stands out like black spots on a white dog, an unpolished girdle. And that's even on a 3 or 4 or 5 millimeter gem, on a very small ones. It stands out that much that it's ridiculous to think that people can't see it. Maybe if it's in an enclosed bezel, fair enough, you're not going to see it. But if it's in an open bezel with claws, an unpolished girdle looks so horrible, and really the entire gem looks unfinished. And I would imagine the value of the gem would vastly be the value of that gem would have to be vastly a lot less than a proper polished gem where all the facets are polished down from the crown through the girdle to the pavilion. Look, like John says, it stands out like a sore thumb. And I can't believe it, to be honest, that there are actual professional jewelers out there who cut gems and they skip that vital step and then try to tell the public that it's from their perspective, it saves money. But gee, it's an ugly looking gem if it's standing out there in a clasp. Don't know how they can absolutely think that it's normal. But these are some of the shortcuts that's going on in this modern world. It never used to happen 30, 40 years ago. People used to take so much more pride in their craft, but clearly things have, somewhat diminished. And when it comes to these overseas gems, if you really have an interest in gems, gemology, lapidary, try to buy gems that are cut, by, quality gem cutters. A lot of this stuff you see from overseas is absolute crud. Most of them don't work or scintillate in the way they should. Even though you think it's good quality and value for money, it's not good quality or value at all. You're doing the industry a really big disservice buying this stuff that's imported. I know in Australia that I do think our jewelers are doing us a huge disservice buying this cheap stuff for $10 a gem. They're only worth $5 or $10 each, half of these gems, and they're worth the prices of $500-$600 by the time they put their margins on it. And the only valuable part of the entire piece of jewelry is the metal, the bit of gold or the silver. The rest is not worth a pinch of salt, to be honest. So try to be a little bit wary of overseas cheap imports from China, Thailand, even Sri Lanka. They're only faceting, to make money, and it's all quick and fast and pretty dodgy. As Dirk says, all the meat points are out. So, like if you've never bought many gems before and you decide to get a loop, as John's mentioned, a jeweler will hate that. So just be a little bit more diligent if you're out there buying gems. You'll be doing the whole industry a big favor if all people start to become a little bit more wary of what's going on, because that will force those type of cutters overseas. It'll force the industry to make a change. And what I found that with a lot of these gems that come from overseas, and I've tried it myself, I will not do it. Sometimes you think, you can buy a really nice bit of, say, for example, morganite, but all the angles are cut all over the place. There's no depth in the gem. So you get a 10 millimeter gem and maybe you think, you can cut that lovely piece of morganite down to a 7 millimeter or an 8 millimeter gem. No way. Like, it's so impossible to cut these shallow gems to a decent size. It's a waste of money and time. And I've seen people do this, and I wouldn't even bother. By the time you've tried to find a design that suits, most designs that are really good and have a nice depth to create that scintillation, you're never going to get half decent gem out of this stuff you get from overseas. They cut gems so shallow and so fish-eyed and windowed that to recreate something half decent out of them, I've found that doesn't work. I couldn't be bothered wasting my time. Cam says, how would one get in contact with you to cut stones? Look, I don't cut for other people, and a lot of people ask me this question. The reason why I don't like cutting for people in general, and I've done occasional gems, well, just cut one recently for a friend. I don't do it because people say, I've got a sapphire, it's really nice, can you cut it for me? And then you end up getting this particular stone and it's full of inclusions. You're going to have all sorts of issues, and you just don't really want to be faceting a lot of these gems. Not only that, sometimes the gem can be really good, and as a gem cutter, there's always a potential that something can go wrong, dramatically wrong. And you really don't want to be carrying the burden of someone else's gem being destroyed for whatever reason. Things can go wrong. I don't often have many issues, but it would be gut-wrenching. Some person's found this beautiful 10-carat sapphire and they've given it to you to create a great gem, and something's gone wrong in the process and you've turned it into dust. I just don't want to carry that weight. And it can happen. And that's why most gem cutters, when they cut for people, they only use their own gem rough material. They rarely would want to take someone else's gem rough. Sometimes they do, but then would have to be some sort of caveat to say, look, if something went wrong, you're going to have to just wear the cost of that piece of rough, not working out the way it would. So I can't be bothered with that. If there are any other gem cutters out there, I'd like to hear, at least John, would you cut someone else's gem? I think John cuts gems, and sometimes I think he sells them. Would you cut someone else's piece of rough if they knocked on your door and said, oh, okay, will you cut this 10-carat sapphire? Be interesting to see what other people say, because I just don't want to do it. Recently, a friend of mine bought a huge piece of citrine. It didn't cost a lot. It was a beautiful piece of citrine from, I think it was from Tanzania, South Africa. Somewhere in Africa. And I faceted that for him, but there was no pressure, because I said, look, if something goes wrong, it's only going to cost you $18 or $20, whatever it costs. So no one's responding to cutting for someone else. I just don't want to do it. I think from Cam's perspective, if you're getting or finding lots of sapphires, you are in the perfect position to start learning how to facet. And by sound of it, if you're from Australia, then there's got to be some gem club locally you can even take that sapphire to, and they'll teach you how to facet it. It's usually within 100 kilometres. There's got to be a gem club somewhere, unless you live somewhere in the Simpson Desert. But yeah, I'm going to read John's response. John says, no way, like you. I don't want to. Yeah, look, it's high pressure faceting for other people. I just don't want to have that burden. I don't think any recreational gem cutter wants to do that. I'm quite happy if I have a gem, and I want to sell it and sell it on eBay or wherever, but, I'll sell it to one of my subscribers. That's not an issue, but cutting for other people is. Ricky, I only cut my rough just for the reasons. Yeah, and that's good. I think it stops a lot of pressure on faceters. Geek Life. I'm not sure if it's YouTube only showing you top comments or delay in the chat, but I think we're chatting more than you're seeing. Yeah, look, I might have to scroll up. There are lots of. I think I'm keeping up with it. I'm going to head off soon. No, I think I'm keeping up with it. Sometimes there's a few side questions that people get involved with others that I might miss. So Dirk's been in to Popo. Just scrolling up to the questions. I think I've answered most of them. Okay, so maybe the next live stream I'll be talking about the girdle outline and what we need to do to get girdle done properly. So I'm looking forward to just getting these two facets polished and cutting part of the girdle, because this is such a large gem and I really need to start making progress on it. I'll answer a few more questions and then I'm going to head off, guys. It's 10:30 in Australia at the moment. How are you going, Albert? Just give me a big thumbs up. I'm hoping that a lot of these videos that people make on YouTube inspires people to become a faceter or a gem cutter. We really do need globally. I mean, at some point, a lot of the old skills are starting to diminish, and for our future generation, it would be really nice to see some young guys, young women, teenagers, take on this hobby. I know in Australia that the majority of gem clubs, most people tend to be over the age of 60. I'm in my 50s, and every time I see a young person come into our gem club and want to learn how to facet, I find it really inspirational, because they're the ones who are going to be taking over the mantle of the future of lapidary, gem cutting, fossicking, all that sort of stuff. In my opinion, particularly in Australia, and it really does bother me, there is a huge industry awaiting people in this country, whether it's mining for sapphires or opening up gem fields for our gems to be mined. And we need to protect our resources. All too often they're going overseas to China. We need to knock this on the head, this nonsense, because what we're doing is we're destroying the future gem industry of this country. And I think that goes for a lot of countries, that we need to be very diligent, look after our industries. This is the future of my country. It's the future of many countries. And we want to preserve jobs and industries and this particular type of recreational industry. I'm not going to be doing this forever, and I think most people who are in the 50s, 60s, and those who even facet in the 70s or 80s, we need the young people to stand up to the plate and take over. And that's one of the intentions I really made these videos, to teach a craft that would ultimately in the future carry on. I started looking for gems when I was about a 12-year-old kid. Me and my dad used to go out prospecting all the time, and that was in a time when it was pretty easy to prospect in Australia. You could go anywhere you wanted, and it wasn't the nanny state we live in, where you could go into any national park back then and look for gems. You could dig holes, and you do the right thing. You fill them back up. You protect the environment. But we need to go back to those days, because Australia is very much, in some ways, it's very much untouched. We haven't even scratched the surface of what is even possible. And unless we do something to protect this entire mining gem industry and even get deeper into becoming better gem cutters and creating our own gem industry, it's well overdue, but we're sort of not doing that. I believe this is probably those people who live in the US. Your gem industry also must be suffering the same problem. I believe that it's an aging generation. There's a lot of restrictions going on with mining, a lot of exports that seem to just disappear overseas, particularly to Asia. I would imagine you guys are suffering the same problem we are. It'd be interesting just to hear a few comments on how the US gem industry is going. I'm well aware that in South America, that a lot of the mines have been taken over by Chinese corporations. They are literally taking tons and tons of high quality ametrine, high quality amethyst, and they are literally, it's going out of Brazil and neighboring countries with boatloads. Whether they're storing it there for future time, I don't know what they're doing. But I think that even Brazil and South America are under a lot of stress with their mining. Yeah, so it looks like the US has very few hobby cutters. But what I heard, that some of the clubs like, Las Vegas, 300 people, that's a huge club. But look, our gem clubs in Australia, even though we had a great turnout for people who put in, they entered into the competition. The Jamboree was over 1,000 entrants. Obviously, something was going well there. Maybe a lot of new people got into the recreation, faceting, and cabbing hobby and silversmithing. Yeah, it looks like America would have an aging population. So, yeah, try to encourage the young people to get into these clubs and reignite the hobby, because I can't see it in 30 years' time almost existing in Australia at the rate we're going. Okay, I'm going to finish up there. Thank you for joining me on this live stream. For those people who got a little bit out of how to polish, I really do need to get a better webcam one day, so that will be on my agenda when things are back to normal. Just reading this comment. Yeah. Queensland. So Dirk mentions one of the issues about Queensland. Hard to go out and find your own as a state forest. Yeah, it's illegal. And this is what's happening. A lot of these forests that initially you could get into 30 years ago, they've become a no-go zone because of the laws. They become state forests or national parks. And you've got all these laws pertaining to mining and fossicking. And I'd just like to say that in Australia, do not be conned by any farmer or any bureaucrat that you cannot have access to Crown land where there are gems and minerals within waterways, particularly rivers. Any river that is deemed Crown land, you are entitled to walk down the inside of the creek bed or river bed and go for it. The only responsibility you have in digging for gemstones is to make sure that you leave it as it is. So look after the environment. Don't go digging into the creek beds or river banks. But look, don't be fooled into that idea that you cannot access Crown land. The rules are very clear, but those people get fooled that in Australia that we don't have access, and we do. The only thing you will be required also to have is a miner's right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things. The farmers, they use creeks and their river systems for the cows to drink out of, but because they think the livestock has access to the river, they think it's their land. And I love Australian farmers, but they are wrong in thinking that the rivers only belong to them and the creeks. They don't. Most of it does not belong to farmers. Sometimes it does, occasionally, if it's listed on their title, but most of the time it's not. If it's one of those heritage titles they own from 150 years ago where the creek belongs to the land, but in most cases it doesn't. Okay, I'm going to head off. So if anyone has one last question, I'll answer it. So I'll just hang around for one more minute, then I'll go. So any more? No, I think looks like we're all finished. So if anyone wants to become a patron and support my YouTube channel, feel free to. There are little perks, but it just helps people out with YouTube channels in general. So I actually thank those patrons who are currently supporting my channel. Okay, thank you, John. And yeah, look, John has been a long supporter of my channel, and I love chatting with John via emails. I was really interested in looking at Las Vegas the other day. I actually looked at the map of Las Vegas, and when you look on the Google map of the size of Las Vegas, it doesn't appear to be that big, but I believe there are over 600,000 people living there. But it looks really remarkably, the outskirts, the desert, and it looks really beautiful. So hello to all my Las Vegas subscribers. It would be one hell of a city to live in. That just looks like such a fun city. Okay, I'm going to head off. Thank you to Lucy, Dirk, all the other people, Albert. I'm just going to scroll through. Geek Life, Popo, John, of course, Garrett. Anyone I've missed? Bob. Cam, thank you for joining Cam's Adventures. Ricky, thank you for joining. Ricky's been a long-time subscriber. I'm going to scroll through, say goodbye to everyone, and go and do some work around the house. Bye to Terry. And Yuri, thank you for your questions. And I think that's it pretty much. If I've missed anyone, Joshua, thank you for joining. Stephen. So it's bye for now, everybody. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.